Chapter 13. The Shocking Truth About Recess. After school, I went to Lizzie's house to help her with her speech, which she would be giving the next morning. I felt kind of funny about being there. Lizzie had been to my house a bunch of times, and her parents had been driving me places for years. Plus, I'd been in her house for little bits of time before, but this was different. Now I was hanging out at Lizzie's house. Lizzie's mom offered us tea and biscuits, which sounded totally revolting, but it turns out that English people call cookies biscuits. We sat around the kitchen table and told Miss Barrett all about the events of the campaign so far, leaving out the parts with magic, flight, and or packs of vicious dogs. She said, "Wow, this is so exciting. My little girl is conquering America." Lizzie rolled her eyes. I knew the feeling. When we finally tore ourselves away from the tea, cookies, and embarrassment, I found myself in Lizzie's room. I was hanging out in Lizzie's room. Apparently, so was Dodger, who appeared out of thin air the instant we sat down. Thankfully, there were 2 chairs, so I didn't have to sit on a girl's bed. Besides, Dodger immediately took to jumping up and down on it. "All right, Elizabeth," I said formally. "I have devoted some serious thought to this last speech, and I feel that the time has come to discuss the issues with the voters. The way I see it, the people want to know where we stand on such serious matters as the improvement of the school salad bar, procedures for decreasing wasted recess time, and developing a mechanism for taking student complaints to the PTA." Lizzie said, "And what do we plan to do about those issues?" "I have no idea," I replied, "but hey, I'm not the one who tricked me into running for president." Dodger stopped doing back handsprings on Lizzie's bed long enough to say, "Dudes, don't sweat the small stuff. People don't care about the issues. They want to vote for somebody they like. So you're golden. Willie is the cool-walking, smooth-talking bringer of donuts. And James is the guy who can't even give a speech without offending half the audience. Plus he got totally hooked in the eye by his own running mate. All Lizzie has to do is remind everyone why you're the true blue choice, and the next thing you know, you'll be wearing the crown." Dodger," I said, "I know what you mean, but well, James isn't the only one with a black eye. And what about all the people who laughed at me because of James' posters? They don't think I'm so cool. Oh, and another thing, presidents don't even wear crowns." "Sure they do. Whenever I see Miss America on TV, she always has a crown. Which reminds me, when's the swimsuit competition? I think we should get you into weightlifting program to bulk up your chest muscles before—" "Dodger, the Miss America pageant and the presidency are 2 totally different things. They have absolutely nothing to do with each other." "No way. Aw, man. That means I made Abe Lincoln parade around in his swim trunks and a sash for nothing, huh? No wonder Miss L never invited me back to their big White House after the election." "Wait a minute," Lizzie exclaimed. "Dodger is absolutely right." I was stunned. "You mean there really is a swimsuit competition? Because I am not gonna." "No, you fool. He's right about the election. All I need to do is remind everyone of how great you are." "Oh, so I'm a great fool." "Yes," she said happily. "You really are. Now go home. You too, Dodger. I have work to do." Lizzie refused to let me see her speech before the assembly, so I was pretty nervous as the big event got started. Just like the last time, she and I were sitting on one side of the stage, and Craig and James were on the other. My black eye had faded to a pale, stickly yellow, but James's was in full gruesome effect. I kind of felt sorry for him, at least until Craig stepped up to the microphone. "Dear classmates, fellow students, teachers, and staff, I was really not sure what I should say today. On the one hand, you all know that this is my 2nd time in 5th grade, so maybe I'm not that smart. Or maybe I'd make an extra good vice president, since I have more years of elementary school experience than just about anybody. But the main thing that confuses me is what I should tell you about James and Willie. I made an agreement with Willie and Lizzie yesterday that we wouldn't pull any dirty tricks today. We all agreed that the election should be fair and square. So does that mean I shouldn't point out that Willie's nickname has always been Wimpy? I don't want to be unfair, and does it mean that I shouldn't point out that even though Willie's posters showed him in a baseball uniform, like he's a big ball hero, really he only got 1 hit all season? I don't want to be unfair, so maybe I shouldn't even mention that Willie hasn't ever been involved with student government before, or that Lizzie has only been in this country since the 3rd grade, even though in the real grown-up election you can't run for president unless you were born in America. Because, I don't want to be unfair." No, I was getting pretty annoyed at this point. Either Craig was really, really innocent, or he was a political genius, unless Beeks had actually written the speech. So instead of pointing out the many problems with Willie and Lizzie, I've decided to focus on why you should vote for my good friend, Mr. James Beeks. James is a leader. James is the guy who had the most hits of any player in the history of Fall Little League. He's also the best quarterback in the town football league and captain of the wrestling team. James Beeks is clutch. James Beeks comes through. He's the kind of guy you want to follow. As you know, James has also been involved in the student government longer than anybody else, and he has really made some great changes in our school. For example, do you remember the Great Recess Ball controversy of 2008? I wonder how many of you know that it was James Beeks who came up with the famous A to Z compromise. For all of you kindergartners, I'll explain what happened. Last year, the big kids were having massive battles every day over which class should get first pick of the balls for recess. There were arguments in the hallways, near riots in the lunchroom. For a while, it was student against student, teacher against teacher, until James Beeks came up with his idea that for the first half of the rest of the year, classes would pick balls in alphabetical order based on the first letter of their teacher's last name. And then, to make things fair, for the rest of the year, classes would pick balls in reverse alphabetical order based on the last letter of their teacher's last name. Needless to say, James's great compromise went through, and there was joy in the halls, peace on the playground, and a better school for all of us. Because that's why James Beeks is really about. A better school for you and me. Thank you. No. Oh, barf. That speech was so corny, you could put it in the microwave and pop it. I hope Lizzie's speech wasn't like that. The whole room burst into applause, and Craig stood there for a moment taking it all in. After all, it's not like Craig had experienced many victories in his academic career. But then gradually, a strange hush came over the crowd as everybody realized that one girl was standing up right in the middle of the first row. I couldn't believe this. It was Amy. She was raising her hand. Craig had no idea what to do. I'm sure Miss Starsky had no idea what to do either. And before she could figure it out, Amy spoke. Her high-pitched second-grader voice carried to every corner of the room. "Excuse me, Mr. Flynn, I have a question." The whole room full of people stared at Amy as Amy took a deep breath and continued. "You know how James came up with that whole compromise thing?" Craig nodded. "Well, wasn't James's teacher that year named Mrs. Alabaz?" Craig nodded again, wondering where she was going with this. I was wondering the same thing. So then, for the first half of the rest of the year, his class got to pick a ball first, right? Because her name starts with an A. Craig said, guess that's true. And then, for the second half of the year, when it went in reverse order by the last letter of the teacher's name, James' class still got to go first because the last letter of her name was a Z. Isn't that true? Craig had to think about it for a bit, but then he nodded. So really, James' so-called compromise simply made sure his own class would always be first. Craig stared at her open-mouthed. So did everybody else. "I'm just saying," Amy concluded, and sat down. In the long, awkward silence that followed, Craig kind of crept his way back into his seat. I could see his whole face was red. Then Miss Starsky recovered and introduced Lizzie. I sweated my way through her speech, which went like this. "Hello, everyone. I have to admit, Craig was right about several important facts. For one thing, he is absolutely right that James Beeks is a natural leader. If you give him a chance, he will lead, and you will follow. In fact, you'll be glad to follow, and you'll feel great about doing what James Beeks says and thinking what James Beeks tells you to think. Unfortunately, I don't think you really want to go where James Beeks wants to go." As an example, and Craig was right about this too, I was not born in America. I came here from England in the middle of the 3rd grade. I remember that day so well. I was so excited to be in this beautiful new country, to make amazing new friends. I even put on my best, fanciest red winter jacket because I wanted to make a great first impression. Then, when I got introduced to my class, James Beeks started shouting, "She's a redcoat, she's a redcoat." And the entire class followed, because James Beeks is a leader. In fact, there were only 2 kids in the whole room who didn't join in the cruel chant. One of them was my running mate, Willie Ryan. James led the class, but Willie did the right thing. Which kind of president do you want? Now I'd like to say a few words about my best friend, Willie Ryan. Oh, some of you might laugh, but it's true. Willie is my best friend, and I'm proud of it. I have to admit, he doesn't look like much. Thanks for pointing that out to the whole school, Lizzie. But if you knew Willie like I do, you'd see him for the great candidate he really is. I've seen Willie fight a raging fire. I've seen Willie sweat and bleed to get better at baseball so he wouldn't let his team down in their big last game of the season. So he might have only had the one big game, but that wasn't luck. That was the hard work and courage of Willie Ryan. But this election shouldn't be about sports. There is no doubt that James is a better athlete than Willie. But tomorrow, when you step into the voting booth, you won't be electing a quarterback. You'll be electing a president. And no matter how much James tries to convince you otherwise, that isn't the same thing. I have more examples of the goodness of Willie Ryan. How about the time Willie stepped in between me and 3 angry pit bulls? How many of you would have done the same thing for your best friend? How many of you have faced an angry Craig Flynn? I have to tell you, Willie has. So you can vote for James Beeks if you want a quarterback, or if you're looking for chances to get led around into doing things you won't be proud of. But if you want a good, honest kid, or kind, brave, smart president, someone you can trust to take care of your best interests, please vote for Willie Ryan, the true blue candidate. Lizzie looked at me and held out her hand in my direction. I couldn't believe it. People clapped. They actually clapped for me. Willie Ryan. It was astounding. When Lizzie came back to sit next to me, I whispered, "Did you really mean all that stuff?" "What stuff?" "Like, do you really think I'm good, honest, kind, and brave?" "Absolutely. And I'm really your best friend, duh." "And do you really think I'm smart?" Well, Will, in order to get elected, sometimes a politician has to bend the truth a little bit. "Oh, be quiet," I said. All in all, it was a pretty good assembly. At the bus stop after school, Amy stopped me and Lizzie. I started to thank Amy for the brilliant questions she had asked Craig during the assembly, but she shrugged that off. As soon as the bus pulled away and left us alone in the corner, Amy turned to both of us and said, "Okay, I've helped you with this election all along. Now I'm fairly sure I figured out the secret of your campaign. I promise I won't tell anybody, but I just want to know if I'm right. Is that fair?" I shrugged. Lizzie pushed around some pebbles with the toe of her shoe. I said, "Is that fair?" I guess so," I mumbled. Amy said, "Okay, so the way I see it, you're getting secret assistance from somebody large who has a low-pitched voice. We'll call him He Who Must Not Be Named. I notice that you're spending a lot of times in the wood. Also, our bananas have been disappearing at an alarming rate, and I've been finding blue hairs everywhere. My conclusion is this: your secret campaign helper is an invisible blue orangutan." Lizzie and I stared at each other. I mean, what do you really say to that? Then we both burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" Amy asked indignantly. "The invisible blue orangutan," I said. "Come on, Amy. Who ever heard of an invisible blue orangutan?" "So you're denying the existence of this mystery primate?" I turned to Amy, put on my straightest, most serious big brother face and said, "I swear that I am not receiving secret campaign advice from an invisible blue orangutan. There. Are you satisfied?" She gave me her toughest little sister detective look and said, "I believe you, but this investigation isn't over." Then she stormed up the front walkway of our house. Lizzie turned to me and said, "Wow, Willie, that was an excellent, technically correct answer. Where did you learn to be so slick?" "Well, Liz, in order to get elected, sometimes a politician has to bend the truth a little bit." And then right there on my front lawn, we broke out laughing